Ja, herzlich willkommen zu einer neuen Ausgabe des E-Talk und ich habe Ihnen ja gesagt, ich mache noch einige Interviews im Nachgang und jetzt ist ein neues Interview. Ich habe auch da einen Conflict of Interest. MindBio Therapeutics, Justin Hanka ist bei mir. Er ist in Melbourne in Australien. Und ja, wir haben schon einmal ein Interview gehabt. Ich habe einen Conflict of Interest, ich bin Aktionär, denn ich war auch Aktionär von BlackRock und MindBio ist von denen quasi separat an die Börse gebracht worden. Die Company ist sehr gut an, 1,5 Wochen an der Börse oder 2 Wochen an der Börse. Wie es immer so ist, wenn man so eine Firma aus einem Spin-out ist am Anfang auch ein bisschen Druck drauf. Und die hat auch die Aktie auch ein bisschen abbekommen. Und jetzt schauen wir uns einfach mal an, was die Company jetzt wirklich so macht. Wie gesagt, ist ein Follow-up-Interview. Das erste Interview haben wir im September 2021 gemacht. Justin, thank you for your time. And I said in my German introduction, I have a conflict of interest. I'm a shareholder. You are now listed since 2 weeks, or roughly 2 weeks on the CSE and also in Frankfurt. I'm a shareholder through the BlackRock. It was a spin out, yeah. How the listing works for you so far? So 2 weeks now, public company is a different style than before. So how was the first 2 weeks?
Well, thank you, Joe. Thank you for the introduction. It's good to see you again. Look, it has been terrific. It's it's not for the faint-hearted to run a publicly listed company, as you know, but certainly the rewards are there and the public exposure is there. And so our choice to take the company public via BlackRock, we think was a good one. BlackRock has a very large investor spread across North America and Europe. And so we're able to carry those investors into MindBio on a one-for-one basis. And so we've experienced a lot of liquidity in the first couple of weeks. We're very pleased with that. Obviously, there is the natural sort of churn of investors that want to exit and take profits. And then we were quite surprised actually to see the amount of new buyers. There's a lot of interest in the stock, and that really surprised us.
Okay. And the new interest coming from you are based an Australian company, and your focus more Australian, but you're listed in Canada and in Germany. So is the investors also coming from Australia through Canada, or how the new investors come from? Do you think?
Yes, well, geographically we're quite spread. So we're domiciled in Australia. We're listed in Canada. We're doing clinical trials in New Zealand, and we have shareholders all over the world. So our seed investors are from Melbourne and Sydney mostly. Some across in Western Australia. So we have Australian-based seed and founding investors in the company. And then obviously we have investors throughout Germany. We have hundreds of shareholders in Germany, the US and also Canada. So we're truly sort of a global company. We've got this unique ability now with the changing status to the regulations in Australia, the regulations that regulate the medical use of psychedelics being domiciled here. So we weren't quite expecting that. So that was a nice surprise for us. So we're truly a global company, and we're ready to sort of expand our clinical trials. And when we're ready to commercialize, what we like about the way we've set this up is that we've got a global footprint now to expand.
Mm-hmm. That's a good switch over to the operating business. So maybe you can give us the last interview was 1.5 years ago, or roughly 2 years. So give us a small overview where you are standing now, and maybe what's coming up next.
Yeah, sure. So starting from the beginning, we're really we're a biopharma, biotechnology company. So we have an interest in developing psychedelic medicines. We have a specialization in the microdosing of psychedelic medicines. And we're doing research and development using psychedelics and microdosing. We've completed a phase 1 clinical trial with successful top-line results. So we completed that last year. We have 2 phase 2 clinical trials that are upcoming. One trial is in depressed patients, and the other trial is in late-stage cancer patients that are experiencing distress. And so we're very excited about this work. This clinical research is very important We're the only company in the world to have approvals for at-home dosing of LSD in our clinical trials. So that's a great advantage in terms of our strategic advantage in this space. And we're very excited about the data we're seeing, because we know that the current treatments for depression and anxiety and so forth involve antidepressants and sleeping pills and benzodiazepines. And those medications they come with a lot of side effects and so forth. And mostly they're not working in the way that we'd expect them to. And so this new psychedelic medicines and microdoses of psychedelic medicines, they're very well tolerated, and we're seeing great results in our clinical trials.
Mm-hmm. You say you have a license that you can that the microdose that the patient can use microdose LSD at home. In which area you have this license? So in Australia or in New Zealand or in which countries?
Correct. Yes, our clinical trials are the only clinical trials in the world. We're the only company in the world to have approvals for at-home use. So we're doing this in New Zealand. We have these approvals for the importing and the dealing with psychedelic medicines, and then we have the ability to give these medicines to clinical trial participants who take them home. And they take them in the same way that they would take any other medication. And that's really important for really progressing this science, because microdosing is a scalable way to use psychedelic medicines to treat these conditions. Ordinarily, a patient would have to go into a clinic to take a large hallucinogenic dose of these substances, whereas microdoses are sub-hallucinogenic. They are moderately perceptual doses of the drug. And then people can take this substance and then they can get on with their day in the same way they would if they were taking any other medication.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay, to summarize a little bit, so you have this license to microdosing for the clinical trials, not that for any other purpose. So, but for the clinical trial, you can use it, and for that you have the license. So to make
that's
this clear.
correct.
Yeah, that's to make
Yes.
this clear. So
Yes.
From this stand, so what are now the next steps so that you can come up later then with a commercial product? What must be happened that you come up with them?
Well, this is really interesting because the rules in Australasia have recently changed. So we are the only company in the world to have approvals for at-home use of psychedelics, microdoses of LSD, and we operate out of Australia. So Australia have just changed the rules here, and they've allowed, they've medically legalized psilocybin and MDMA, and they've done that ahead of phase 3 results. So the traditional pathway to having a drug approved in the FDA or the TGA or any of the therapeutic bodies around the world is to advance a medicine through phase 1, 2, and then phase 3 clinical trials. But we've seen that advance in Australia in advance of the completion of phase 3 trials. So our hope is that, if we continue to see good data out of our phase 2 trials, that we'll be able to introduce perhaps these medicines on a special access basis across Australasia. And certainly we'll be able to do that in New Zealand because the New Zealand government has partly funded these trials, has provided grant funding. And their expectation is that that funding is provided on the basis that, we find a commercial use case for this medicine. And of course, we have to discover that it's safe. We have to determine that it's effective. And certainly if we find that it's more effective than the antidepressants that we're using to treat depression and these conditions, well, then we've got a good use case.
Can you make or can you say us the difference between the antidepressive and in your product? What is the advantage of your product compared to them?
Yes, so the traditional course of treating people with depression and anxiety and so forth is that a person will present to a doctor. They'll present with low mood, for example, low energy and so forth, and they'll be prescribed an antidepressant drug, one of a couple of dozen available drugs, different iterations of the same antidepressant. There is no science around how this works. They've all gone through clinical trials, and there's some evidence that they work. But we're finding that when people go on these drugs, that they don't work in the way that we're expecting to. We're seeing an escalation in the rates of depression, the rates of suicide and so forth. So these medicines are not working. What we find with psychedelics, however, is that in microdoses and macrodoses, people who take these substances find them life-changing and life-saving. So the difference is the mechanism on the brain and the action in the brain. So the brain ordinarily, in the ordinary course of its own maintenance, will have neurogenesis, the creation of new neurons and dendrites in the brain. When patients ingest psychedelics, they experience neurogenesis. It induces neuroplasticity, the creation of new dendrites. And this is really exciting science that we're seeing, because people's brains are changing when they take these substances. And when people are in this state of plasticity and their brain is actively changing, they're more accessible, they're more receptive to the talking therapies and the psychotherapies that people need to get to deal with their traumas and so forth. And so it's a combined approach to the taking the medicines plus the therapeutic approaches. However, in our phase 1 clinical trials, we conducted a randomized, controlled, double-blind, placebo-controlled trial in 80 healthy men. And what we found is that healthy men, on dose days, when they took microdoses of LSD, they felt happier, they felt more socially connected, they had enhanced feelings of well-being, they felt more creative, and they had more energy. So this is healthy people. So this is really exciting, because really healthy people are very level, right? We didn't really expect that sort of substantial result on healthy individuals. So we're really excited about introducing this to depressed patients, because, of course, when people present with depressed mood, they have low energy, they don't want to connect with people, they've got their feelings of wellness are very low, they're not enjoying life in the same way as they ordinarily would. So the data that we're seeing is very exciting for the continuation of these clinical trials and at phase 2 level.
This brings me to an interesting point. When healthy people coming up with these positive results, can you not use this then also on the healthy people side too, or in some later?
Well, let me tell you something, Joe. For me personally, I'm an investment banker by trade, right? I'm psychedelics naive before I was introduced to this industry. However, I fell in love with the proposition that these substances and these new medicines can change people's lives and save lives, because the state of our health mental health is really outrageous, and we need to do something. And so what surprises me is this data in healthy individuals. We take all sorts of medicines and nootropics to make us feel better, to give us more energy and vitamins and so forth. And certainly the data that we've seen from microdoses of LSD is that they make people feel more creative, they're more productive, they feel happier, they have a good day. We know it's safe. Look, it's the early data though. I don't want to make statements that make people go out and find LSD in the streets and take it because they think it's going to make them feel better. Certainly, this is a trend, the trend of microdosing, something that surprised me. There is sort of an underworld of people who do take microdoses of psychedelic medicines all over the world. It's astonished me. And right through Silicon Valley, and they all report the same thing, that they feel more productive, they're more sharp, they have more creativity and so forth. So our scientists have looked at the grey literature. So there's the experiences of the user reports, and they've based their dosing regimens, and they've based the science around what was purported in the grey literature. And so the reports of the grey literature is true from what we can see from our randomized controlled trials. Of course, we know we need to progress this into phase 2 trials. And at the end of a large phase 2 trial, I think we'll have a lot more data and a lot more to say about how this affects people, the people that we're trying to treat with depressed mood.
Mm-hmm. So coming to a timeline, is it possible that you can send some timelines, what we can expect from the company, from the news flow in the next few months?
Yes, we've got a lot of news flow. There's a lot of activity in the company at the moment. So we're preparing for these two phase 2 clinical trials in depressed patients and in cancer patients. So they'll be starting in the coming months. And so we're very excited to get those underway. We're also still analysing the data from our phase 1 trial. So our phase 1 trial took an enormous amount of data. We've published our first paper on the top line results from those trials, which showed positive impact on mood, which I've just discussed. We have 7 more papers that are coming out of these trials across many other aspects of what we've discovered. We've taken bloods, DNA, mRNA, and brain scans, heart scans, and so forth. And we've also sent people home for 6 weeks at a time with wearables. And we've monitored people 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So we know a lot about the way these microdoses affect people. This is actually not just a pharmaceutical play for MindBio. This is a big data play. We're amassing an incredible amount of data here that we're going to use to create these interventions to treat people. And so this involves a whole range of digital therapeutics that we're wrapping around our microdosing protocols. And so we'll be able to arrive, we think, look, in about a year's time, we will have a complete intervention for microdosing that, if we were permitted to do so, we'll be able to treat patients in the real world.
Okay, so that's mean a lot of news coming out in the next few months. So that is good. Then news drives normally the share price, and I think everybody's happy with the share price going up.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, obviously the share price is for the investors to decide, and that's, the price always finds its level. But we're certainly excited about these developments. We've made some groundbreaking new discoveries in our clinical trials. And so we're very excited. We're developing the narrative, and we're developing the science. We're just finalising some of the discoveries that we've made. We've made some groundbreaking discoveries. We're looking forward to announcing those to the market in the coming months.
Sometimes the share prices make the same like LSD or micro LSD in your case. So it brings me happy, more happy, better mood, and so on.
Well, that's right. We like happy shareholders. We certainly have. One of the things, Joe, about our shareholder base, these clinical trials and what MindBio has been doing has really captivated the attention of investors. We've had such an incredible amount of support all over the world. I've been speaking all over the world at conferences and so forth, and this really resonates because it's time to make change for mental health. Investors are not only looking just for return on investment; they want to follow their money. They want to put their money into places that are doing good for the world. And certainly, this is what we're doing here, and we're delighted with the support that we've received.
Last question: how the shareholder structure looks now, and where are the biggest group based?
So we've spread really. We've probably in Australia, from what I know of now. Obviously, we don't know, what the shareholder mix looks like, but certainly, just prior to listing, we had probably around about 60 shareholders out of Australia, early investors and shareholders here. We have obviously hundreds of shareholders across Europe and particularly in Germany, and then obviously Canada. We also know we've got a large shareholder contingent in the US. We're applying for the OTC QB markets, and so we over the coming months, it takes a little bit of time to get on those boards, but that'll enable us to US investors to trade in the stock more actively from the US, and also we've just listed in Frankfurt, and our intentions are very much to head towards the NASDAQ. We want to build out our phase 2 clinical trials. We want to raise more money to invest in new clinical trial work, and then the aim is really the NASDAQ.
How many shares are outstanding?
There are 133 million outstanding,
okay.
plus those reserved for issuance.
And you need any money soon, or?
Certainly to conduct new clinical trials and to develop some of the new science and technologies that and new discoveries, we will need to raise more money to do that. However, we are fully funded for 2 phase 2 clinical trials.
Okay, for these 2 clinical trials, you're
fully
fine.
funded. Fully funded.
Perfect. Justin, thank you for the update. Good luck with the share price. As a shareholder, I hope we're going higher, much higher from now. And good luck, and have a good day in Melbourne.
Thank you, Joe.
Ja, es war ein Update, MindBio. Vor 1,5 Jahren haben wir das letzte Mal ein Interview gehabt. Sie sind seit 2 Wochen an der CSE und auch in Frankfurt notiert. Es geht um Mikrodosierung von LSD und Sie haben auch die Lizenz, dass Sie klinische Studien, dass die Patienten zu Hause diese einnehmen dürfen, und das ist eigentlich extrem wichtig. Er hat auch erklärt, dass in Australien und Neuseeland die Regulatorien geändert worden sind. Das heißt, es ist viel, viel einfacher jetzt dort mit dem Umgang dieser Produkte. Es ist viel legalisiert worden. Sie haben eben, wie gesagt, 2 klinische Studien laufen jetzt. Sie haben extreme Daten aus der ersten klinischen Studie bekommen, also Phase 1. Vor allem, das war sehr interessant, wo er gesagt hat, sie haben das ja an gesunden Personen gemacht, und die Leute, die Mikro-LSD bekommen haben, an diesen Tagen waren viel besser drauf, haben eine bessere Stimmung gehabt, haben mehr Energie gehabt, waren kreativer, und das hat das Ganze, waren sehr interessante Daten, und sie haben auch das erste Paper jetzt rausgebracht. Und es werden noch weitere Paper folgen, denn es geht darum, generell um diese Mikrodosierung, und die haben auch die 24 Stunden, 7 Tage die Woche überwacht worden für 6, 7 Wochen. Also es sind extrem viele Daten da, wie Mikrodosierung, vor allem vom LSD, eben auf den Körper wirkt, und alle möglichen Gesundheitschecks dazwischen, und war sehr interessant, und wie gesagt, das Ergebnis war, dass vor allem auch die gesunden Menschen viel, viel positiver angestellt waren, und es geht natürlich darum, in die klinischen Studien vor allem auch Antidepressiva. Er sagt, die Antidepressiva wirken teilweise total unterschiedlich bei den Personen, und da kann man nie genau sagen, wie wirklich die Person darauf reagiert, und das war bei LSD, bei der Mikrodosierung von LSD viel, viel besser. Es kommen sehr viele News in den nächsten Wochen, Monaten. Es sind 133 Millionen, wenn ich mich jetzt noch genau erinnere, Aktien draußen momentan. Wie gesagt, seit 2 Wochen sind sie an der Börse notiert. Sie wollen jetzt an die OTC-BP auch gehen, weil halt Amerika ein riesengroßer Markt ist. Und dort auch der Markt ist, wo am meisten das anerkannt wird, was sie machen. Und da hat er vollkommen recht. Kanada ist zu klein und Deutschland haben zu wenig Erfahrung mit dem, und deswegen ist dort sicher Amerika der interessantere Platz. War eine interessante Sache, wie gesagt, ich bin Aktionär, ich hoffe, dass der Aktienkurs dementsprechend auch nach oben reagiert, und jetzt schauen wir mal, was uns die nächsten Daten bringen, und dann wird sich auch das mit dem Aktienkurs hoffentlich wieder einspielen. Das war ein Update von MindBio Therapeutics, so. Heute ist der 22. Mai 2023. Tschüss und Baba, Viertag. Justin, thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Great to see you again.
Great to see you.